jams of cars will be created in neighborhoods. Subways will be flooded.
The apocalyptic effects of this disaster are having a reverse effect in other parts of the world. With warm water no longer flowing north across the equator due to the shutdown of the ocean currents, heat builds up in the southern oceans. Because of this, the band of highest temperatures that once circled the equator shifts further south, along with the rain belts that normally drench the tropical regions of the world.
The rain belts would probably shift southward, putting areas that now get a lot of rain into drought.
The subtropical region of Punjab was once India's breadbasket, an area with rich soil and an ideal climate for growing many types of grains to feed the country's 1.3 billion people. Now the lack of rainfall has become a crisis for over 1/7 of the world's population.
You have huge breadbasket regions, say in India, that require flooding for rice, that require large amounts of moisture for huge amounts of crops.
That moisture used to come from seasonal monsoons, but not anymore. The farmers fear they won't be able to harvest enough grain to feed their families.
The monsoon system over Asia is changing because of the cooling from the circulation shutdown, extending downwind over the Asian continent. That could lead to not just a slowing of the monsoon, but a complete collapse. And if that persisted year after year, the drought could be devastating.
Now that could easily topple the bread baskets of the world.
The world's areas of drought spread, and crops keep failing. From Southeast Asia to the southern regions of the United States. In the Texas Panhandle, farmers helplessly watch their way of life die off as the lack of rainfall turns cornfields into deserts. And strong winds kick up the parched soil, producing violent dust storms.
This kind of drought will make the Great Depression Dust Bowl look paltry. This is orders of magnitude larger. This is all the corn from the Texas Panhandle evaporating. Farmers won't be able to cope with this. The green belt of Texas will just be hot, desolate, and disturbing.
And while the northeastern U.S. is battered by superstorms,
The shutdown of the circulation is effectively shifting the trade winds downward. You've compressed them in a smaller amount of space, so the actual winds themselves could increase.
for people who once took their next meal for granted, like the former head of the Port Authority, finding food for his family becomes a full-time occupation, while parts of the U.S. become a hellish inferno. Over 5,500 miles to the south, in Rio de Janeiro, the climate disaster brings other dangers. Years of relentless monsoons trigger outbreaks of typhoid and Zika virus. In 2016, the mosquito-carried Zika virus was just an emerging problem. Now, stagnant floodwater provides a massive breeding ground for the insects and the disease.
People would give each other a wide berth on the streets. There'd be elaborate measures to try and create a bulwark against microbes. I don't think that the cities in their present form could survive an event like this.
Whole ways of life are now impossible. In Boston, a family of lobstermen who had worked these waters for centuries now find the seas off Massachusetts lacking the fish they once used as bait to catch lobster. Over 6,000 miles to the southeast, in Rio de Janeiro, the seaside villas of the rich have been washed away. And the hillside shacks of the poor are buried in mud after decades of monsoons. Now both rich and poor fight for precious space inland.
A densely populated city such as Rio would be catastrophic if the sea levels rise that much. All of these people would then have to be displaced, collapsed, and condensed in an even more populous area as refugees.
Humanity most likely is going to try to move around and find these pockets where we like this temperature range, we like this amount of rainfall. Now, politically, that's going to be trouble because they may start putting up borders and walls and keeping people out.
Most of the older climate refugees, some of whom came from as far as Boston in search of warmer weather decades ago, have died. Now their children are forced to retreat inland.
This is a huge problem that would be pretty difficult to overcome. Where do you put a state's worth of people into another one?
The younger generation of the lobstermen, whose families migrated from Boston to Florida, is still alive. And now they cast lobster cages into the Gulf of Mexico.
Sea level rise will completely encompass the city of Manhattan. You can then build sky bridges from one part of the town to the other. You won't be able to get around unless you're in a boat.
The ocean is not going to put up with a seawall that is trying to keep it out. It is going to find another low-lying area in which to flood.
The future of humanity remains uncertain, and the effects of the climate disaster are far from over.
You have the prescription for kind of a dark age. A more violent society is those survivors tried to scramble and hold on to what they've got.